One of the biggest online casino empires in the world is now starting to show some cracks in the foundation, with 3 lawsuits already filed, an investigation over alleged fraud in its own games, and also one of its newest faces is under scrutiny in Belgium. And this is all while its biggest creators are now quietly jumping ship. But I mean, it's safe to say, when you trace the story back to its roots, you kind of end up somewhere a little bit unexpected: Runescape. Because before Stake was a multi-billion-dollar operation, it was just an idea cooked up between 2 online gamers who met through an MMORPG, betting in-game gold coins. The whole story starts when Ed Craven and Bijan Tirani crossed paths in the late 2000s through Runescape, specifically through a part of the game where players would bet virtual gold against each other in duels. That mechanic is called staking, which is definitely not a subtle foreshadowing at all, but the two started collaborating in ways to turn virtual gambling or wagering into money, because RuneScape coins could be converted to cash on third-party sites, which technically violated the game's terms of service, but it worked. And from there, they moved into Bitcoin dice games when in 2013, they launched a platform called Prime Dice that essentially let users play using cryptocurrency. And at that time, they had no license, no real regulatory framework, just a website and a lot of demand that started pulling in users almost instantly. Then, a few years later, with Prime Dice as their foundation, they built out something far more ambitious: Stake.com. This was launched in 2017 as a full-service crypto casino/platform, and it was licensed through Curacao, one of those tax havens in the Caribbean. But this platform was headquartered in Australia and was growing surprisingly fast from the start. And just to give it some sense of scale, by 2024, the platform was generating roughly $4.7 billion in gross gaming revenue, meaning this is after paying out player winnings. So definitely not bad for a couple of guys who started just by staking in an online game. Now, Stake's growth definitely didn't happen out of nowhere. The company made a very deliberate bet early on that the fastest way to grow a casino platform on the internet wasn't with traditional ads or SEO. It was actually getting the most watched people on the internet to gamble or stream on their website. And they were willing to pay massive amounts of money to make that happen. Trainwrecks TV, who became one of the platform's first major partners, once told his viewers that he'd taken around $360 million from Stake over roughly 16 months, which is just stupid money.
I'll release what I got paid since the beginning of my contract. I've been paid $360 million for 16 months of gambling.
And XQC later went live on stream and also mentioned that his arrangement with Stake pays him a flat $200,000 per gambling session, regardless of how long the stream runs or how much he actually wagers.
It could be for 10 minutes, could be 5 hours. I get 200K flat.
And Aiden Ross had Ethereum worth an estimated $78 million flow through accounts linked to him from Stake between late 2021 and early 2025. And then, of course, there's Drake. The rapper signed on as a Stake ambassador in a deal reportedly worth over $100 million a year at the time. And his role was essentially to gamble or play publicly and make it look interesting. So Drake himself would host multi-hour-long live streams and post about his wins and losses on Instagram to his followers, which made it feel way more real than traditional advertising ever could. And I guess this was pretty much the Drake effect, now helping boost Stake. And they leaned into it so hard, even running promotions where users could enter to win big alongside of Drake. But for a while, a lot of this original gambling streaming was ran through Twitch, which at the time was the undisputed home of live streaming. However, in September of 2022, Twitch introduced a policy change that banned streams of slots, roulette, and dice games from platforms not licensed in the US and or in other markets with proper consumer protection standards. Stake, whose main website still operates under a Curacao license and is effectively blocked from the American market, was a direct casualty under that rule. So Craven and Tirani did what anyone with a few $1 billion and a reason to build a streaming platform would do. They built their own streaming platform. And that's why today we have Kick, which was launched in December of 2022, positioning itself as kind of like this anti-Twitch, a creator-first platform with a 95% revenue split for the streamers, which is, that is massive. For context, I'm pretty sure the base contract on Twitch is a 50-50 split. But obviously, this new platform had completely different policies and allowed all of these gambling streams to happen. And within about a year, they actually pulled over so many of the big names that they already had deals with on Stake, including XQC, Aiden Ross, and so many others. And because of that, a whole bunch of other streamers followed. So the official line from both companies is that Stake and Kick are separate businesses, just both housed under the same EasyGo parent company. And Craven has said in its interviews that the two operate independently with clear ownership lines. But what's also true is they share the same building in Melbourne, they share executives, and that Kick's content ecosystem seems to essentially function as a marketing arm for the casino. And a lot of the streamers play on stake while broadcasting on Kick. So the clips then get packaged and pushed across social media, which then loops the traffic right back to stake. So it's safe to say that this definitely worked. And by the third quarter of 2025, Kick had climbed to about the 4th place among the most watched live streaming platforms in the world. But here's where the legal trouble starts, because when the main site was banned in the US, and I guess a big chunk of their audience being in the States, the company decided to roll out a separate American version called Stake.us and labeled it as a social casino. So the framing is that it's just entertainment. Nobody's actually gambling or spending real money, as players could use, I guess, like virtual currency called gold coins for gameplay, which are explicitly described as having no cash value. But apparently, bundled with every gold coin purchase is a secondary currency called Stake Cash, which can be wagered on all the same casino games and then cashed out to a flat 1-to-1 rate against the US dollar. So attorneys in several states looked at that structure and arrived at essentially the same conclusion, that the gold coin framing is a wrapper to make real money gambling look acceptable. So the first major lawsuit against Stake landed in Missouri in October of 2025. A man by the name of Justin Killam filed a class action against Stake, Drake, and Aiden Ross, arguing that Stake.us was functionally the same as the main website. Same games, same layout, same experience, and that the dual currency model was a deliberate legal workaround rather than, a genuinely distinct product. And the suit also alleged that Drake and Aiden Ross had been presenting their wagering as personal gambling, when the money that they were betting was actually being supplied by the platform, meaning the losses they occasionally showed audiences were just, hey, this is a marketing strategy rather than real financial consequences. And again, this is currently being alleged. We don't have proof of this right now, because Stake denied everything, and they said they'd contest the claims. And Aiden Ross on livestream described the lawsuit just like this.
Guys, there's nothing to talk about regarding the title, regarding what's going on with Mess. You guys can look into it. I will tell you guys this. It's bull. To me, it seems like somebody, if you guys can see what Asmongold said, because someone sent that to me, it's literally true. Like, just watch the Asmongold thing. It's bull.
But then a second lawsuit followed a few days later in New Mexico, making nearly identical arguments. And then, on the last day of 2025, a third complaint was filed in Virginia. And this one went somewhere completely new, because the Virginia filing named 4 defendants: Stake, Drake, Aiden Ross, and an Australian guy by the name of George Nguyen. And I had no idea who this George guy was, but apparently he's an Instagram guy with over 500,000 followers. So the complaint alleged that Drake and Aiden Ross had been routing money through Stake's internal tipping system to George, who would then go use those funds to pay bot services to artificially inflate streaming numbers for both of them across platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. So that is a crazy allegation. But we did kind of just cover that Kick staff was admitting that they were aware of bots on the platform. So I can't really say that's related, but bots are around, that's for sure. But according to the suit, the goal was to prop up the appearance of popularity, pushing Drake higher in the recommendation algorithms, which then obviously suppresses competing artists in the process, and then of course generating royalty income from streams, which isn't real. Now, obviously, these are some serious allegations, and the complaint describes it as racketeering activity that had been running continuously since 2022, and the two plaintiffs were seeking at least $5 million in damages. So Stake's response was brief. They called the whole thing nonsense and specifically denied that Stake US even has a tipping mechanism. And they said they weren't worried about the case. And Drake, Aiden, and George, on the other hand, they didn't comment publicly. And as of right now, all these cases are still working their way through the courts. And all of that could have easily been a video on its own. But then came February 2026, when a Bloomberg Businessweek investigation dropped and quickly took over the entire conversation. So now you have Cecilia D'Anastasio, Olivia Salon, and Lian Yen writing an article reportedly based on the data analysis of nearly 500 hours of slot footage from 25 streamers on Kick. 5 of them were among Stake's highest paid profiles: Drake, Aiden Ross, XQC, Trainwrecks TV, and Roshtime, with the remaining being about regular or smaller streamers with not too many known financial ties on the platform. And the reporters apparently used an AI model to process a screenshot from every 4 seconds of footage, pulling out balance amounts, bet sizes, and which game was being played, then manually verifying the data. And at a baseline level, they found that across all 25 players, a big win, which apparently is a 1000x return on a single bet, happened roughly once every 10,000 spins on average. And apparently that 1000x is the threshold the community typically considers as a big win. However, Drake's rate on EasyGo-owned games was a little bit different. So they were apparently 4 times higher than that, or once at about every 2,500 spins. Aiden also posted similar numbers in one EasyGo session. And the part that Bloomberg leaned the hardest on was when both of them were playing third-party slots, games made by outside developers available across multiple casinos, and their win rates were completely normal. And then you have 4 other streamers who played a comparable volume of rounds. They never recorded a single big win. Now, obviously, that's a lot of information, but in other words, the conclusion they reached was that big wins are extremely rare. However, when it came to Drake and Aiden playing slots owned by Stake's parent company, those wins were happening way more often than they should, while their results on regular third-party games look completely normal. So if this is all true, that's a problem. And the investigation also documented a specific session from August 2025 where Drake had been playing for over an hour and losing steadily, until Ed Craven, Kick or Stake's co-founder, joined the stream and suggested that he switched to a specific EasyGo game. And then Drake won big multiple times within the following hour.
What are we doing? Look, can we make shake, brother? Seriously.
I've been watching the whole stream. I don't know. I honestly feel like you've been getting some bad advice from everyone in the call here. You know, these picks have been terrible.
Okay, so give us one. Can we get one?
Yeah, you know what? No. Eddie, you're right. The Snake originals are a terrible pick, huh?
Again, I can't show gameplay of him winning. We can only zoom into his camera and see the reaction. So they noted that a majority of these massive wins across their dataset occurred in sessions when Ed had either appeared on stream or dropped game recommendations into the live chat, which is definitely interesting. But after that article was released, Stake told Bloomberg that the findings were categorically incorrect. They argued that calling something a big win is a very loose definition and doesn't really account for how different these games are, especially in terms of volatility and payouts. So comparing win rates across different games can end up being very misleading. Then XQC got onto Twitter and said this is the worst journalism he'd ever seen. He argued the sample size was just way too small and the language was slanted and the research was surface level at best. And the other Kick co-founder, Bijan Tarani, also posted that the mythology was flawed, pointing out that the small footage windows Bloomberg had both for Drake 1.3 hours and Aiden only 0.1 hours or 6 minutes was just way too small. But Bloomberg had already addressed this in its published mythology, noting that 1.3 hours of gameplay equaled about 15,000 spins, which exceeded the 10,000 spin average their data showed. Hold up, you're betting 15,000 times in 1.3 hours? That's crazy. But I guess whether that's a big enough sample for probability analysis and slots is genuinely a statistical debate. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below, but that's roughly where things stand. And just to be clear, Bloomberg actually analyzed 4.6 hours of Drake's gameplay and 6.2 hours of Aiden Ross's total gameplay, but those 1.3 hours for Drake and 0.1 for Aiden come exclusively from EasyGo-owned games, the same ones where Drake's big win rate spikes massively. But also, around the same time the Bloomberg investigation was circulating, some notable movement was actually happening inside of Stake's own world. So Trainwrecks TV, one of the platform's largest running and most prominent partners, went onto a stream and suggested that he might walk away. His main point was that some creators contribute far more to Stake's traffic and cultural reach than their payment reflects, and that informal agreements built on personal trust rather than formal contracts leave streamers in a very bad situation. He also brought up the idea of organizing a mass exodus from the platform, though he stopped short of confirming anything definitive.
Yeah, bro, I'll tell you what, Eddie's a shark, I'll tell you that. He forgets how things went down, I'll tell you that. He made me realize that you can trust no friend without a contract, I'll tell you that. It's time for a revolution. It's time for us to do our own thing. No, seriously, it's time to show them that, listen, if you want to devalue us, if you're trying to play ball, all right, then let's see what we can take. Think out of everyone in the industry, I could organize the largest leaving of streamers from Stake. What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, there's change coming, bro. Just know that. Not now, but soon.
But I guess Aiden Ross had already made his move. After being named in the California lawsuit, he signed a new gambling deal with another platform called RainBet, while maintaining that he'd still continue streaming on Kick because of his friendship with Eddie.
This is the first question. A lot of you guys saying, is brand risk still happening? Yes. So now RainBet will be taking over and they will be making sure that brand risk is good. The second thing is I'm on very good terms with Eddie. I'm still obviously on Kick. They're still gonna be paying for my clippers. They're still gonna be kind of just doing what we're doing with I want to do, but I'm just going to tell you guys why I left, and I don't want anyone to think it's kind of just like a malicious thing.
And I guess just to paint how far Stake's sponsorship footprint actually stretches, this whole story picked up on a new thread just a few weeks ago when on March 11, 2026, the former Belgian soccer winger Eden Hazard announced he would be joining Stake as a global ambassador. So here he posted a promotional clip in Stake gear with a caption, "Ready for a new game," and released a statement about being excited to connect with fans in a new chapter after his playing career. But within 48 hours, the Belgian Gaming Commission had opened an investigation because Stake doesn't hold a license in Belgium, which means it's on the country's blacklist of illegal operators, and advertising for unlicensed gambling services to Belgian users is illegal. So now you have a commission spokesperson confirming that they were examining whether Hazard's content specifically targeted people in its home country, and noted that if the answer was yes, he would receive a formal notice to cut ties, with potential sanctions if he didn't comply. But by the time those reports were released, Hazard had already updated his Instagram bio to notify that Stake isn't available in Belgium or Spain. Now, whether that update is enough to satisfy the commission is something that apparently is still being worked out. Those lawsuits are still working through the courts, and the Belgian investigation into Hazard is ongoing. Then on top of this, you have a bunch of allegations where people are like, oh wait, is Stake, because of all these lawsuits, pivoting its business into RainBet? Who knows? Because now rumors are floating around online that because of all these lawsuits, that RainBet is an exit strategy for Stake. Could this be why so many of the Kick streamers are moving over to RainBet slowly, but are still staying on Kick? Who knows? Regardless, the question of was Stake's gambling odds rigged or not? That's still up in the air. None of the most serious allegations have been proven yet, and Stake denies the most significant ones. But what isn't really as disputed is that a casino that technically is banned in most of the countries it operates in built one of the most effective influencer marketing machines on the internet, generated billions of dollars, and is now really seeing the cost of this approach. So for the next few years, they're probably going to be in court. And it's safe to say this story will probably just get a whole lot more interesting. So if you're new here, feel free to subscribe, drop a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.